Washington, some Republicans have had some tough questions to her about some of the past comments that she has made and whether or not she has promoted any Russia propaganda in the past as well. She could face a tough confirmation fight ahead. You see RFK Jr., as you mentioned, David, lining up there along with North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. You see him there as well. Pam Bondi standing there as well. She just had her confirmation here on the Hill just last week. And then you see Kristi Noem. She was on Friday. Elise Stefanik. We're expecting her confirmation hearing to unfold in the next couple of days. You also
It's a
saw
great day, y'all.
well. He just
It's a
actually
great
stepped
day.
down from his role as a member of Congress. And that's what's interesting too here, David, as all this is playing out. Donald Trump, the president-elect, he has plucked some members of the House straight out of the House and right into his cabinet, should they be confirmed, or just in his administration in general. And that does leave House Republicans with a slimmer and slimmer majority. Speaker Mike Johnson even joked, please, please, please do not take anybody else.
Fully aware of the math, Speaker Johnson knows the margin will be very, very close, particularly given Donald Trump's choices. I want to bring Rachel Bade into the conversation as well. Rachel covers Congress for us. And Rachel, when you look at that array of cabinet picks, among them RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, where do you see any potential bumps ahead in the confirmation process? And are the rest expected to get through?
It's a great question, David. And I mean, particularly because when Trump was naming a lot of these folks to these cabinet positions, I was hearing a lot of anger from Republicans privately. A lot of them did not come out publicly, of course, to say that they don't want to be seen as, lawmakers who are trying to be obstructionists to Donald Trump when it comes to picking these jobs. But, they have fallen in line quite a bit, David. I mean, after Matt Gaetz, his initial pick for Attorney General went down, there was this sort of message that was sent to lawmakers up on Capitol Hill, specifically regarding Pete Hegseth, his pick for the Defense Department. A lot of Republicans didn't like him privately. They didn't want him to get this job. They didn't think he was qualified to run a massive agency like the Pentagon, that he didn't have enough experience. And yet, Donald Trump's allies, they rallied together and they made an example of these people who were expressing concerns about him. And since then, folks have gotten in line.
Rachel, we're looking at this picture of former Vice President Mike Pence walking alone, and John Carl, this says it all, by himself. His wife is not with him, but showing up, just as he did 4 years ago. He said because of his duty, and I would gather that's his explanation as to why he's showing up today.
Mike Pence is a patriot, and Mike Pence, on that day, January 6th, for the one and only time of his entire vice presidency, defied Donald Trump. Donald Trump wanted him to single-handedly overturn that election, but imagine that moment. Mike Pence's life was in danger on that day. The chance of the attackers of the Capitol saying, "Hang Mike Pence," whisked off the Senate floor. And David, you and I have gone back and looked at the video of just how close the rioters came to Mike Pence before
So
he was
happy,
taken in
so excited.
down into the tunnels and to where he held up for several hours beneath the Capitol building, guarded by the Secret Service.
But this is sort of the new world order as far as American democracy right here, as you look at Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. And Elon Musk, Mary Bruce, has made it very clear that if you don't, get in line with what Donald Trump would like to do, and certainly these first 100 days, but get in line, period, that he's willing to use, his money to go after you and to primary you if you are resistant in any way, certainly as a Republican, to Donald Trump's agenda.
His money and his megaphone, and both are very powerful, and he does plan to use them. He has made that incredibly clear. I think one big question, of course, is just what exactly is his role going to be in this administration? We've actually already seen some back and forth between those, Trump's loyal supporters and advisors like Steve Bannon, who certainly doesn't appreciate Elon Musk's role here. But Elon Musk has also shown, even in recent weeks, the power that he can wield in Washington. I'm thinking back to that spending fight when Elon Musk single-handedly torpedoed those bipartisan negotiations and created a real headache for Speaker Mike Johnson. So I think anyone who thinks that these tech leaders are going to sort of be on the sidelines and be, casual advisors may have another thing coming. It remains to be seen, and also, how they will be welcomed by the Hill and lawmakers if and when Elon Musk and others may try to insert themselves going forward.
And Rachel Scott, you detected some boos when Mike Pence entered the room?
Exactly, David. So here in Capital One Arena, you have thousands of Trump supporters that have shown up. They are playing what we are watching here live on our screens here on the Jumbotrons. And as soon as Vice President Mike Pence, Trump's former vice president, showed up inside of the Capitol, we heard a very loud set of boos, which is pretty remarkable to hear for someone who served 4 years with President-elect Donald Trump in office. You know, Mike Pence did put out a statement ahead of walking into the Capitol, and he said this is a day when American does what we do to celebrate our democracy and the peaceful transfer of power. We just have to remember exactly what Mike Pence did on January 6th. It is those core beliefs that he upheld that day, and it's a reason that brought him back to the Capitol again today.
So some boos at the arena where supporters of Donald Trump are gathered for what will replace the inaugural parade just a short time from now, early this afternoon. Of course, Rachel Scott, our eyes and ears there. She heard some boos when Mike Pence was up on the big screen. A different reception there in the hall, though he walked in alone. But as you can see, right here's another example. President Clinton and former First Lady Hillary Clinton. Let's listen. We watched this entrance in 2017. The former First Lady, former Secretary of State, who had hoped to make history as the first woman president, came so close. She won nearly 3 million in the popular vote. That was the margin, but did not win in the Electoral College, though even that was very close across 3 states. These are the moments, Lindsay Davis, that are the test of democracy. Former President George W. Bush, former First Lady Laura Bush arriving too. And it was in 2017, Hillary Clinton sat next to George W. Bush, and the two of them made their own observations about what they saw play out that day, their initial reactions to the carnage speech. Though they're back 8 years later because of their duty. And there you see Lara Trump, Eric's wife, arriving with their family. She's a rising star in the Republican Party, was considered for a short period of time to be a potential replacement for Marco Rubio in Florida, though that's no longer the case. And there you see former President Obama and arriving alone, Lindsay.
You know, one thing that I'm mindful of is the American tradition. We have so many people who could run for president, but here you see, when we saw George Bush, of course, he was there for his father's inauguration, then his own, with Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. We had Bill Clinton run, then his wife run for president. Here you have Donald Trump at now his second return to the Capitol, now about to be sworn in as president. But one thing that I was struck by, and we talked about this earlier with regard to Chris Christie saying that the real criteria right now is loyalty. When we saw Mike Pence coming in, J.D. Vance has already said that if he had been in Mike Pence's shoes then in 2021, he would not have certified the results of the 2020 election. And I think that that is so significant, right? In that when he was chosen, Donald Trump said loyalty really is paramount. And one thing that we're seeing also in a difference as we're looking at some of the cabinet members this time around, the last time many of his appointees were standard bearers. They were well known inside the Beltway, a lot of experience, and now we're seeing these outsiders, the Kash Patels, the Tulsi Gabbards, Pete Hegseth, RFK Jr., tapped for key roles in this administration. Quite a difference. Even when we're talking about these executive orders that we're hearing that he's going to sign, potentially 200 on day one. 4 years ago, he signed one executive order on day one.
Donald Trump did. 8 years ago, yeah.
8 years ago.
Yes. I know it's hard to because he's back. It was just 8 years ago. There's Marco Rubio center screen. One notable thing about Marco Rubio in his confirmation process is in this deeply divided climate, he was welcomed by both sides of the party for his hearing just a few days ago. There you see RFK Jr. there in the center, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, of course, Pete Hegseth right there behind him, who also looks like he could very well land the role as head of the Pentagon. Pam Bondi there, Linda McMahon, Lara Trump, as I mentioned, ran the RNC, was pivotal in helping to sort of guide the party during this presidential election. You saw there for a time Susie Wiles at sort of the center screen for a bit. She is in white, and she is going to be the first woman to run the West Wing as chief of staff. And she has indicated to the president-elect, that she very much intends to keep that job for 4 years. She's going to work very hard. We know that that did not happen his first go-around. It did not last that long. There's Mark Zuckerberg right at the left of your screen as the camera pans. Pete Hegseth on the phone in the back row there, Martha.
On the phone making last-minute calls where I cannot imagine what that is about. You know, one of the big differences, and Lindsay's right, they are all outsiders, but what they also are absolute loyalists to Donald Trump. Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing, I've never heard anything so political. Many questions were just, Donald Trump's going to be a great president, and he's the person who can do it, and Joe Biden didn't do a good job. So it was incredibly political. So when I think about the chaos of the first Trump presidency, and the Mattises, and the Spicers, and the Reints to a degree, that they were all let go or left, this time it could be, you could have far less chaos because you have those loyalists.
And as we train our eyes up, they just changed the shots there. This is what we call the live pool feed that all the networks are sort of sharing. But a moment ago, you can see Susie Wiles had taken a seat, grabbing a quick drink of water before this continues to play out. And John Santucci, I told you I would come back to you. I was hoping to do so as we can see Susie Wiles, but we'll see her again. But again, you heard me mention there a moment ago, she's made it very clear to the incoming president she intends to hold on to this job.
For 4 years, David, she said she would be by Donald Trump's side. And David, I'm going to play fashion police for 5 seconds. To see her wearing white, she's often referred to as the ice maiden around Donald Trump for her loyalty to the president-elect.
Cool-headed, he says, which is where he came up with that nickname. And here we see the Supreme Court entering Terry Moran, Chief Justice John Roberts, followed by the other justices, many of whom were appointed by Donald Trump, appointing more than the typical president gets the chance to do. The court now significantly conservative-leaning, given Donald Trump's moves during his first administration. And John Roberts, the Chief Justice, Donald Trump hasn't always seen eye to eye with. You heard more from Donald Trump about members of the court than you typically do from a president. He's even talked about Samuel Alito in recent days and talked with him as well.
That's right. There was a phone call recommendation for a clerk to Samuel Alito. A little bit out of the ordinary, but this is a court that is not just conservative, but it's pro-executive. And yes, Donald Trump has had his problems with Chief Justice John Roberts, but that immunity ruling that Roberts wrote changed the game for presidential power. This is a president who comes in, you know, at the head of the movement that is finally for it in the Congress, with majorities in both houses, and with the Supreme Court that has supercharged the authority of the federal executive power. And that is a combination we haven't seen. And the reason is, none of those justices were ever practicing politicians. We used to have practicing politicians, but they were common. None of those justices ever worked in state courts. These are federal government lawyers, most of them, and they have juiced the presidency, the majority, in a way that will certainly help Donald Trump accomplish his very ambitious objectives.
I know it's a point, Mark Updegrove, that's not lost on you either. You know, so much is made about Donald Trump and the mandate, even though from a popular vote standpoint, it was a relatively close election. He won the Electoral College, no question, mandate there, if you will. Does have the Congress, though very slim margins in the House and Senate. It'll still be quite a feat to get things passed, particularly when you're plucking members of the House to serve in your cabinet. Very slim margins there for the Speaker of the House. But as Terry points out, it's not just that the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House, or are about to. It's the fact that the Supreme Court has given Donald Trump, whoever the next incoming president was, but now it's Donald Trump, significant power and protection now to do what they want.
There's so many things that make Trump 47 different from Trump 45, David, and that's one of them. The broader powers of immunity that he has based on the verdict in the Supreme Court. Plus, as you said earlier, he has the fealty of his party. The party had resisted Donald Trump in 2016. He had people in the House and the Senate who resisted him during the course of his term. The Liz Cheneys and Adam Kinzingers in the House, the Mitt Romneys and John McCain's in the Senate. They're gone now. And there are so many Republicans who owe their tenure in the House and Senate to Donald Trump, David.
Thank you, Mark. We're watching Don Jr., Eric Trump now arrive, Barron Trump in the back. He stands about a foot taller than his brothers. They're tall themselves, but he's taller. There you see Tiffany Trump as well. Barron Trump attending NYU in New York. Melania Trump has been asked, does she feel like an empty nester? And she said, not really. I raised him to be his own person. And she has said, I will go to the White House. I'll live there. I'll serve as First Lady. But I'll go to Mar-a-Lago when I'm needed, and I will go to New York when needed as well. And she will be and continue to be very connected to her son, Barron. They have been close really through his childhood. We watched him grow up. He was away from the public eye for some time and then reemerged as someone who's quite literally taller than the rest of us and who has helped his father with this victory. Barron Trump quietly advised his dad on areas where he could reach young men voters, podcasts that Barron was interested in, and Donald Trump listened. Somebody else, though, in that grouping of children arriving is also deeply influential now. And Rachel Scott, that's Don Jr. It was Don Jr. Who suggested RFK Jr. I know there were others who suggested him as well. And it was Don Jr. who said J.D. Vance should be the pick. And his father not only listened to him and benefited from that advice, he now truly trusts Don Jr. as a political force.
Yeah, Donald Trump Jr. has had a massive influence on President-elect Donald Trump's campaign. You mentioned it there, David. He was the one that suggested Senator J.D. Vance at the time to be Donald Trump's running mate. The president-elect listening to his own son. And President-elect Donald Trump even admitted later in some interviews that he didn't quite know exactly how it was going to work out there, as some of Vance's own controversial statements came to light, which he was pressed on repeatedly, but then he said it ultimately did work out. Of course, he said that after the election, and even down to his cabinet picks, right, as well. You mentioned Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This is a president-elect that looks to those who are close around him for advice and counsel, but you saw it there. He really did follow the advice of Donald Trump Jr. and also Barron. We saw Barron walk in as well, and it was Barron that encouraged his own father to really go outside and use different types of media to try to reach younger voters, younger male voters. And this is why we have seen the president-elect even talk about TikTok, saying it has a special place in his heart, because he does believe ultimately it did help him in this election and get things across the finish line. The president-elect listening to both of his sons on that front.
I want to listen into them. We're going to keep our eyes trained. Thank you, Rachel.
This is great.
Rachel, incredible reporting as always. We are expecting now at any moment to hear the First Lady Jill Biden and the Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff introduced for the first time to this room for the final time too as part of the administration. Jared Kushner arriving there.
They're going to boo.
He was an advisor, as you remember, the first term, and so was his wife Ivanka, certainly Donald Trump's daughter. Both of them they might help from afar, but not inside the White House this go around.
All them rich people in the room, bro.
And Jared Kushner's business has been quite successful, John Carl, in the interim. In fact, it's been in recent weeks that
all that money in the room.
Albania, for example, for a new hotel.
He's got a $2+ billion fund, Middle East money driving it. Incredibly successful. One big factor behind his decision to sit this one out. Although, David, Donald Trump still will
all
reach
that
out to
money
Jared
in the
Kushner.
room,
I
y'all.
would be entirely surprised to see him eventually return to the West Wing.
That's like $1
Ivanka,
trillion.
Not so much, right? Given the fact that she has explicitly said, "I hate politics."
Which is interesting because
Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Zuckerberg. All that money in the room.
The hard right movement didn't really trust either one of them.
All that money in the room. It's crazy.
Former Vice Presidents, the Honorable Dan Quayle, accompanied by Mrs. Marilyn Quayle, and the Honorable Michael Pence.
Haven't talked about Dan Quayle lately. Here on the broadcast, Dan Quayle returning with his wife. And there's Mike Pence. So much discussion about Mike Pence arriving. Lindsay, you had asked the question about whether or not Karen Pence would arrive. It seems she's going to sit this out.
And I think that perhaps isn't a surprise given the body language of what we saw at Jimmy Carter's funeral when she made no eye contact with Donald Trump and Melania as they entered the church. And when Mike Pence was asked about that subsequently, he said, my wife is her own person. You'd have to ask her why she made that decision. But once again,
Ladies and
say
gentlemen,
what you want
the
about Mike Pence.
42nd President of the United States, the Honorable William J. Clinton, accompanied by the Honorable Hillary Rodham.
The former president having campaigned for both Joe Biden and then for Kamala Harris when she was the top of the ticket. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, just honored by President Biden.
And really a remarkable ceremony. Joe Biden gathering some really people to honor, including Hillary Clinton. What an arc for Hillary Clinton to be in the room today, given, of course, what it was like for her 8 years ago during this very moment.
She said it took years to get over how close that loss was. You saw her reach over and shake Susie Wiles' hand. Susie Wiles, right there in center frame. Of course, she will make history as chief of staff.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 43rd President of the United States, the Honorable George W. Bush, accompanied by Mrs. Laura Bush.
John Carl, many had asked if George W. Bush would make any kind of political statement given these politically polarized times, and for those who have covered him for years, we would often say...
See how these guys come out with their wives? Now Barack gonna be by himself.
Him and Donald Trump, but George W.
Come on, Michelle, you could have came.
Not interested in getting involved.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 44th President of the United States, the Honorable Barack H. Obama.
Mary Jordan, Barack Obama, being applauded by that room as he walks by. And all these different relationships, actually, we were talking about this earlier, Lindsay was alluding to it as well. The Bush political dynasty, the Clintons, Hillary Clinton trying it, Barack Obama obviously serving, and then his vice president, Joe Biden, running years later and becoming president. But Mary, Michelle Obama not attending, and people will notice that.
She's clearly making a statement because there are planes, so no matter where she is, she could be here. She said, as she wrote in her memoir, I cannot forgive Donald Trump for putting my family in danger. He said...
Ladies and gentlemen, the Chief Justice of the United States, the Honorable John G. Roberts, Jr., and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States.
She said that because he had said that the birther, that basically Trump had said that Barack Obama wasn't American, wasn't born here, and is an illegitimate president, and he said that led to enormous death threats. And she has said that more recently, too. So that's why she's sitting out. I think people watching this, though, are comforted at this odd and anxious time we're in, that we see people who really don't agree politically shaking hands. There is some level of comfort in this ritual.
Bro, it's politics. You say grimy stuff, and other people say grimy stuff. What are you talking about?
The Supreme Court that we're seeing there, that Congress, they're far more aligned, and there's less check and balances this time
Who
than
gives
there
a
was
fuck?
the last time Trump came to power. And the consolidation of power in the presidency this time is something that people are worried about.
It's a very good point. You said an odd and anxious time, and I think that's well said, Mary. And on the consolidation of power, it does make accountability a major issue going forward for reporters covering, any of these institutions. When you have Republicans in the White House, the Senate, and a conservative-leaning court. The question is, the American voters who have voted in Donald Trump and who want relief at the gas pump and at the grocery stores and in this income inequality in our country, and certainly action on the border. And I think there'll be a lot of questions moving forward. We'll see some of that this afternoon about why Joe Biden didn't act earlier You've seen big changes at the border in the final months of his administration, and many have said, well, why didn't this happen years ago? Maybe there'd be a different outcome. But the issues of the economy and immigration front and center, and they will be as soon as he's inaugurated and sworn in with these executive orders. Here you see Jill Biden, the First Lady, and Doug Emhoff. And Jill Biden, Mary, who is the fierce
Trump
defender.
and Barron Trump.
They're the Trump children entering, Don Jr., Eric, Aaron, Tiffany. Enormously proud of their father and partly responsible for this victory. Those children worked very, very hard, and I say children, but they're adult children, and they were there for their father in 2016, and they were certainly there 8 years later to try to win back the White House. And what they believe were injustices that their father faced along the way. We are about to see Jill Biden, the First Lady, and as I was mentioning, Mary, a fierce defender of her husband till the end.
No one is more protective of their spouse than Jill Biden, and it is interesting to see her walking with Doug Emhoff. The friendship between the Bidens and the Harrises, the Harris-Emhoffs, is a real genuine one. I think you felt that and saw that, you know, in the process, as we've mentioned, when Joe Biden announced he was leaving the race and quickly coming out and backing and endorsing Kamala Harris, and she was fiercely loyal to Joe Biden till the very end, something that history books will certainly question. We all remember
A
that
young
moment
man
when she
right there
struggled
making all
in
that
question
money.
here on ABC's The View to explain how she would distinguish herself from the president.
All this money in the room, y'all. Look at all this money in the
That
room.
relationship, politically strong, but also personally between these two families.
Personally strong, and it might have gotten away politically. Because
Exactly.
people have looked back at that moment and thought, from on a personal level, she
All
had a
that
hard
money
time
in the
probably
room.
taking aim at her boss, even though she wanted to win that election. And that was, many believe, an obvious question that would have come her way. But she had a hard time speaking out against the man who picked her to make history as vice president.
She simply was not going to put any daylight between her and the administration that she served. And it was a difficult, situation she was put in, certainly. 107 days is not a long time to launch a campaign.
Barron Trump there at the right of your screen, and there have been a couple of images of him. Quite striking to watch him grow up over these last 8 years, and I think just out of frame is his mother. We'll wait for the other camera angle to pick this up. But John Carl, what a day for the Trump family.
I mean, what a journey for the Trump family, going through not just the criminal trials, but the Trump organization itself.
This is good stuff, y'all.
Was on trial in New York, lost a major judgment.
I'm going to end the live stream, but I definitely will create shows and videos throughout the day about this. This is a great day, and I appreciate y'all, and I love y'all.
And now they're here